Welcome back. Today I'm trying Puzzle Rush Survival. As you can see on the right, my top score is 29. So let's see if we can break that today. Alright. We are going to... is that checkmate? If I just bring this rook over here? Not quite. I think I have to bring it right there. Okay. That was checkmate. One, yay. I am in check. Okay. Should I just capture it? They don't have a good follow-up because I would just capture. I think I just take it. Okay, here if I capture back, it's a trade, but I've already just gained this bishop. So I think that's a good, because if I just move out of check, we get this situation, right? So I think I should take it. Okay. And here I have an interesting situation. That's just checkmate, right? Oh, also I learned I can do a new color on this. I think it's Control Shift. No. Is it Control Alt? No. Is it Shift Alt? Nope. Anyway, the other day I learned how to do a new color, but now I can't remember it. Oh well. Let's see. I think that's just checkmate. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We have the black king trapped here. I believe that is just checkmate. One move checkmate. Okay. I hesitate to do those instantly just because so many times there's a trick to it, and I didn't want to do that. Here, I don't think there's any way they can avoid this checkmate, so I'm just going to go right there. Okay. And this one looks like check. They can block, but then I would just take that. When they come up here, then I would go behind. But if that doesn't work, then I'm getting checkmated right here. So that's got to be it. That's got to be it. Yeah. Okay. And it goes up behind, and then that's checkmate. Okay. Fortunately, the early ones of these are usually pretty simple. Also here, I think this is just checkmate, right? Because my bishop guards the getaway square. Okay. I know they're going to get harder pretty quick. Okay. That's just checkmate, is it not? No enemy pieces guarding that square, and my bishop would be protecting my queen. Okay. This is pretty early in the game. Looks like most of our pieces are still undeveloped. The first thing I'm seeing is this check, and I believe that's also just checkmate. Okay. Interesting. I think if I put my queen right there, the black's only response would be to run away. Then I would put my queen right here, and they would be forced to capture, and then my rook would come up there. Okay. Yeah, they have to capture, and then that's checkmate. All right, 10 with no mistakes. Good job. This is still a long ways from 29. They're going to get harder. I believe that is just checkmate. Okay. Lots of enemy pieces getting close to my king. I do have one check. Well, two checks technically. Which one would be better? This one I think would force the king closer. This one would just fail to the pawn, and then I would not have a follow-up check because the pawn would be right there. So I'm going to use this as my candidate move. Check, which also has the benefit of getting out of the way of my queen. Okay, so with my knight right here, the king would then have two choices. No. Wait. There's three choices. One choice would be the rook capturing, which I almost missed. In that event, then the queen would come down, the rook would have to block, I would capture, and it would be mate. Okay. If the rook did not recapture, for example, if the king moved over, then I would come down with my queen and that would be mate. And I think that would be true if the king went the other way as well. Okay. All right, that one took a little longer because there were a couple of steps to it. Here, I believe it's just to capture the bishop, because then the king would not be able to get closer because my king guards that spot and my pawn would guard this spot. And if the king went there, then I would come here with my king to get the opposition. And I'm pretty sure that moving past will just fail to them putting the bishop in front of it. So, okay, get the opposition. Now, I believe move the pawn forward because the king then would not be able to go here, here, or there. So it would be forced out. And then I could keep going. Okay. And now because that king attacks this spot, I have to move my king up. Okay. Endgame stuff. Let's see. We have we're down a queen, but we have the rook and the bishop on top of that. So let's see. I don't think that's a good idea. Is it? Or is it? Rook would recapture. And, well, it wouldn't have to, though. That's the thing. Because that's not check. So the rook wouldn't have to recapture. I just think that it would, because they don't have any good checks at that point. And if it did anything else, then I would win the queen. So let's go with the theory that the rook would recapture, and then I would have a choice of recapturing with the bishop or the rook. And I would choose the rook because it would be check. And then the queen would have to recapture, and I would just be up a bishop in the end game. Okay, that is one option. Another option would be some sacrifice or something like that, but I don't think that's good because the king can just recapture, and then if I check again, the king just recaptures and I'm down. So it's got to be the rook move. Okay. And now I think, again, as I mentioned, I think the better option here is to capture with the rook rather than the bishop. Because if I capture with the bishop, the queen's not in danger, the king's not in check, and then this queen can get up to some shenanigans somewhere. So I'm going to capture with check. Okay, just up a bishop in the endgame as I suspected. Okay, 14 without a mistake. Let's see. Oh, pawn, and see, these are the ones that I think I was talking about in the list of weaknesses I need to work on. Okay. Neither side has any passed pawns. But both of us can create passed pawns here, I think. Currently, the white king cannot get into my side because my pawns guard these two squares, and there's no other entrance route. Okay, there is an entrance route for the king. It could come this way if my king wasn't here. So I think I should move forward to force their king back. Because, for example, a pawn move, that's my only other... The only thing I can move besides my king is this pawn, and they would just capture and then be better off. Because then they could create a passed pawn here. So it's got to be the king coming forward. Because the king coming backward allows this in. Or, yeah. I think that's what it is. It's got to be that. Okay. Now again, this doesn't look like a great move because then the pawn would capture with check and be protected by the king. So here I think I'm going to go here to get this pawn to create a passed pawn of my own. And I believe there's no other choice. Okay. Still can't capture this pawn, but once I take this one, their king can slide in one way or the other. But I don't think there's any other choice besides taking that pawn. Okay. There, I believe, is the best move because it allows my pawn to move forward and keeps their king from coming. Knew that was going to happen, but I'm going to win this race. And there's nothing I can do about that pawn. And gotta be a queen here. Okay, that one went on a little longer than they normally do. Okay, what to do here? I believe this is the answer. And the reason is because the rook can't block that check. The king can't come this way because of my king. Or this way because of the rook, or this way because of my rook. So it would be forced here. Then I could check, trade off the rooks, and get this pawn. I think that's the answer. Okay. Not sure why the king didn't try to stay closer to that rook to take back, but we cannot analyze these because it's the puzzle rush, so they just keep reloading new ones automatically. Okay, I'm not doing great here. However, I have a check. They will block. I will say check again. The king will have to move away, and then that will be mate. I don't think there's anything better than that. For example, this would just be silly. Because, I mean, I don't have another rook. If I had another rook, that wouldn't be too bad. I could check over here and down there. So I think it's got to be this, block, check, king moves back, I take. Because trading here does nothing. So this check forces the king back. Okay, we're just over halfway there. Here we have a bunch of our heavy pieces lined up here at these two pawns. Now, I am pretty sure that if I sacrifice my queen, the king is forced to recapture, and then moving this rook over would be checkmate. Okay. Let's see. I do have a check. The knight guards this escape square here. You know what though? I have other checks. Let's see. That's the only rook check. Then that forces the king to either go back or here. That's 4 choices, though. That's not a very forcing move. There's a fork in which I win the rook, because right now I'm down a piece. Right now I'm down a piece. That wins the rook. So I'm thinking that's better, because the rook check, I mean, what, the king just moves here, and then that's my only follow-up check. They can capture, I capture back, and then the king takes it, and I guess then I could come over here, but again, these 2 pawns are gone, so the knight fork has to be it, pretty sure. Like this is bad because we just trade off our knights, and then I'm still down a piece and lose a pawn. Oh, well, I overthought that one. That's my superpower. One of my many superpowers is thinking too much about simple things. That would be checkmate if this bishop wasn't here. But the bishop is there. Let's see. Is there any way to get rid of that bishop? Not an easy way. Also, I would have checkmate if this bishop wasn't here. Because of that. My other bishop guards this getaway square. So, I'm wondering if this check is the answer, because the king would not be able to move. White would be forced to recapture with the bishop, and then that would be mate. Pretty sure. Nothing can block, and the king can't move. Well, that can block. Okay. 20. All right. If I check with the rook, I lose the pawn, so that's not great. They're in a similar situation. If they check, they lose their pawn. Well, I can take this pawn, but then they take mine. Then I would have a check here, and what would be their options? I mean, they could come up, and then what do I do? I'm going to pause this one and think about it for a second. I'm also a little distracted because there's a neighbor dog that hasn't stopped barking for about an hour, and somebody else is hammering constantly. Those two may or may not be related, but I don't know. I've determined that my move here is probably a king move. And the reason is I can't move this pawn. If I move this pawn, it just gets captured, and then my opponent has another passed pawn. Although I would be able to capture this one and then take the next one. But then I would just have lost this pawn. And of course, once my rook gets off that rank, then I would lose that one too, to the king. If I check, I lose this pawn, which is, I mean, that's my, right? This is my ace in the hole right here. It's about to promote as soon if I can get that king out of there. So I don't think I should move the rook. If I tried to move the rook, say, to here to guard this pawn, well, then the king can capture that and then clean up this pawn, even if I promote. So I can't think of a good move for any of those pawns. I mean, any of those pieces. the best move I could think of for the rook was just to take this pawn. But then the king takes that pawn, and then I have to figure out a way to get that one, I guess. I guess I could come up beside it, and if it advances, I could take it, and I would have another passed pawn. Maybe that's it, is to let that one go. See, yeah, I had already decided that it had to be a king move, like this or this. Probably the latter, king to f5, because you know, then if they check me, I would just take the pawn, and if they move the pawn forward, then I would just come further forward to threaten the rook. That's what I was thinking. But now I'm wondering if it's not this, give up that pawn, come forward to threaten the next pawn. But then what would they do when I moved forward here? Again, if they moved the pawn, I would just take it and have another passed pawn. If they moved the pawn, I would chase it, I guess. That would be bad, probably. Another king move I had thought of was something like this in order to protect a rook move and this pawn for a eventual checkmate. Maybe that's it. If I go king here, then I'm free to move this rook because this pawn is protected. Oh, and then that would be mate. So they would have to do some... Okay, so that threatens checkmate. If I move my king here, I think I'm on the right track now. Move my king to g3, which protects this pawn and also blocks this square from the enemy king. And the pawn is blocking that square from the enemy king. So any check then would be checkmate, like this. So if that's my move, then how does white respond? They're not going to do a simple pawn push because I'm threatening checkmate. So they're going to have to... This wouldn't help, moving the rook over here to hit that pawn, because that would still be checkmate. This would only help temporarily, because I would check, they could block, and then I would take it. And that would be the case with any other rook move. I think that's it. Right. Okay, that took way too long, but I got it. 21 in a row. The king has just gotten out of check. I do not have great follow-ups. I mean, this is a follow-up check. There's a piece hanging as well. If I check there, there's no block, but the king has multiple options. For example, here. I'm down on material. Sorry, let me evaluate this just a little bit. I am down on material by a knight. I can even that up by taking this right now. And sometimes the answer to a puzzle is just taking the free piece. That has been the answer a couple of times. However, other times there's a piece hanging and the answer is not to take it because there's also a forced mate on the board. So the answer here is there a forced checkmate? And if so, where, how, etc. But the only, I believe that's my only check, which again, the king could come down, it could go forward, it could go here. If it went if it went back to h2, then I could check again, or again take the knight. But I don't think I would have any sort of mating pattern if you know, if I'm here and if I'm there and the king comes down. What can the rook do? The rook could go here, and my opponent still doesn't have much. I mean, this check just dies, right? And then I would be threatening some sort of mate. Check. King moves here. Rook comes to my aid. They can do a desperado check and I could capture, and they could do another desperado check and I would just move out of the way. And then I don't know what they would do, and then that would be checkmate. That's one answer. But the king doesn't have to go down to h2. The king can come forward, in which case I could slide over and check. They could block with the knight. I could check again. They could then just get out of check. Or they could have gone there in the first place. If I check here, they can just go here, and then I have nothing, because now they're guarding the knight. Another option is right now to move the rook here, threatening to come over. But then couldn't they just get out of that by this and protect the knight? So I think maybe it is to just take the piece. And again, I'm probably overthinking this. But if I take the piece, then my queen guards these two squares, and then this threatens mate. And in the meantime, they don't have anything on me except desperado checks. You know what? That's not true. Let me think about this again. If I take this knight, my queen is no longer on the second rank, and then this is a check that I can't get out of. I could block it. Oh, good grief. No, that's... Oh, my goodness. Holy moly. If the queen goes there, I would just take it with the rook. Okay. I may need to take some more vitamins or something. But so I'm thinking it's to take the knight. Let's do it. Oh, wow. See, I told you. Superpower is overthinking. I overthought that. But we're at 22. The opponent has a passed pawn and the promotion square is protected. So they... Looks like they're about to win a rook for a pawn. Unless I have something. And I do. I have a check, which the opponent would be required to take because the pawn guards these two squares. And then bringing the rook here would be mate after a brief but pointless interposition. So that has to be it. Check, check, check. Checkmate. All right. I think last time I did this, I had already missed at least one by the time I got to 23. So I'm doing fairly well. All right. The bishop has blocked check. I have a follow-up check. Which cannot be blocked because knights cannot be blocked. This would force the king here. But the rook would still be guarded at that point. And then the bishop wouldn't be pinned anymore. So I couldn't do something like this because they would just capture. And then this wouldn't do anything because the king's right there and could take back. So that makes me think that it's something else. It makes me wonder if it's not this check. And I know that seems silly, but hear me out. The bishop is still pinned as long as the king is here, so it couldn't capture. If the rook captured my knight, I would get the rook for that. and the bishop can't move because it's pinned by my other rook. But that's just a slight going up on the exchange, and that's usually not the answer. Now what happens if I capture here? And it would be check. So the one option would be to move away, but if they did that, then that would be mate. So I believe if I capture the bishop, check, that's e7, king recaptures, then couldn't I just slide this this rook over? But then, yeah, but then the king just gets away this way, or even that way, for that matter. So I don't, maybe the rook sacrifice isn't it. Another thing I am kind of thinking of, if we did say check here, if we did check on c7, knight to c7, king is forced to move. I take the rook. Yeah, I didn't follow that one through enough. And when the bishop recaptures, this is checkmate, I think. Only legal move would be to capture the rook. And then this is checkmate. Wow. All right. Do I have some sort of... Wow, I am down... I have a queen for these three pieces. That is not great. I do have checks, but they don't seem really great. And I don't see a check that forks one of those pieces. Wait. No. For example, the knight would just take my queen right there. That would be bad. Here the bishop would take my queen. Here the king would take my queen. There is this check, but that doesn't really force anything. I mean, it just forces the king to move here. And that's the same with this check. Either of those, the king just moves forward. The second one gives the king two options. Are there any other checks? Well, I mean, there's that, but also that's not good. So, but none of those checks do any forking. And we like the forking, especially when there's this many pieces. If I, check here, the king has two options, and I still... I mean, then if they went there, I could maybe do this. But the king could just get out of that check by protecting the bishop. Here, there, and then back, perpetual? Surely it's not perpetual. I feel like this is one of those where I am missing something obvious. That's not even a check. It does threaten the rook, but it's not a check. Where would the rook go? Oh, that would be mate then, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay, so you have to watch out for that because the knight guards this square, so the rook to b8 is checkmate on me. So yeah, I need to do something to not allow that to happen. But again, I only have two safe checks, as far as I can tell. And none of those guard the b8 square. Or threaten any of these pieces whatsoever. This is the more forcing move because it only allows the opponent one option. And then I could come back, but then we're right where we started. This one, again, allows them two options. That one, we're back where we started. This one would... would disallow me from returning to the original square. I would have to follow up, say, here. What would be the point of that? Or here, possibly. Yeah, threatening the bishop, but then again, wouldn't the king just come toward the bishop, and then I could fork it there? Is that possible with the more forcing check? It's not, I don't think. Yes, it is, right here. Threatens the rook. Okay. This is the more forcing check because it only allows them one square. Then I follow that check by going to e4, which would fork these two. Wow. Okay, at 25. Okay. And I still haven't missed one? Yeah, see, I have a tendency to get overconfident, so I have to watch out. There are 3 pieces coming toward me. What are my options? I can put my knight here, which I think is the best move, because it threatens both of these pieces, but especially the queen. So the queen would want to move, and then I would take the bishop, right? Possibly. I think that's the best move, is the knight moving here, because not only is it threatening this fork, which, I mean, you know, the queen could just move to protect, you know, and this, but it also, depending on where the queen moves, it's threatening this fork, and then the bishop is left hanging there. That's, but I'm also wondering if maybe it's not over here, which threatens this fork and leaves the bishop hanging. Whoops. But they would just take the bishop in that case, right? See, if I moved here, they wouldn't just take the bishop because the queen's in danger. So the queen would have to move. Then I could come back and get this and protected by the bishop, depending on where the queen moved. If I went here, they could just I think they could just capture this with check, and I would have to recapture, and then they could do something about that square. Like, oh no, if I went there, the knight just captures. Okay, I'm going to go with my first instinct, which was this. Okay, they did capture here with check, which means I have to recapture with my queen. I mean, I could recapture with my king, or I could just move out of check, but I think I should recapture. And I think I should recapture with my queen, which hits the knight. Okay. Well, that queen move guarded against that fork, which was good for them, and got their queen out of immediate danger, and threatens my knight. So one option here would be to just take the knight, which protects my knight and would be guarded by this pawn. That's what I'm going to do. I should take that first, not go for the fork. Yeah, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Pretty proud of myself for figuring that one out. Okay, this is not great. However, let's see, what else is there? I mean, that check just loses to the king taking it, not to mention that the fact that the rook could come back. King captures here, rook captures there. Those checks don't do anything. Capturing here, the pawn retakes, and I'm up a pawn. Oh, because I'm currently down some pawns right now. Looks like I have a slight majority on the queen side, but they have 2 extra pawns on the king side. So I don't think it should. I don't think there's anything else because there's not a trick here like a queen sacrifice or something, because then I'd lose both of those pieces, right? Same thing with either of these moves. I just lose the queen and then trade these pieces. So I don't think there's a trick here to this. I think I just have to take this rook because there are no safe checks. There's nothing else to take the rook with, because that would be not smart. I think. So there are a few other options, I think. You know what? It would leave that pawn hanging too. And that one would be with check, forking the rook. I think that's my follow-up. Yes, instead of this pawn, I think, yeah, my follow-up has to be here, which is check, hitting that rook. So that's what I'm going to do. Fingers crossed. All right. 27. I think the last video that I did, it was 27 was my record. Okay. That's nice. Should I push it? And then that? Is that what I should do? That seems like a reasonable move, right? I'm not worried about checks here at any point, even after this rook moves, because the king just gets out. The pawn is currently not protected. But if I move it, it will be protected. And then that will be setting up this. No, but then they would just take the pawn, right? No, they couldn't take the pawn because it would be check. They would have to take the rook and I would promote. I think this pawn move is my best move. But other options are putting a rook behind it. And then doing something. I don't know. Those are my candidate moves right now. I could put this rook here now. It's guarded. And that rook would be pinned to the king. But then wouldn't they just bring this one down to protect, and then I would push the pawn? That's the more forcing move. That's more forcing than this. This doesn't really force anything yet, I don't think. Whereas this forces something now. And like I said, if they did come back to protect, then I would just take. When they took back, then I would have 2 rooks. So that's what I'm going to do. Again, fingers crossed. It's one of those two. It's the pawn push or this, right? With this as a third candidate move. Now push the pawn or take the rook. If I push the pawn, they'll capture. I'll capture. If I take now, they take back, and then I have to run to protect this pawn. So I think it's a pawn push. Wait. Push the pawn. They could take the pawn, but then I get a rook for a pawn. Oh, I get a rook for a pawn. Okay, 28. I'm only one away from my record, and I haven't missed one yet. Oh, please don't miss this one. That would be embarrassing right after I said that. The king is smothered up. Let's see. And I have pieces under fire here. But I believe this threatens checkmate. Is there any way out of that? Yes, there is a way out of that. Put my queen here. The knight knocks off my bishop and guards this square. But then I take the knight, right? And I'm still threatening mate that they can't get out of. I don't think it's taking the knight first, because then the king is up here, and then I can't get in there with my queen. So I think it's putting the queen here, giving up the bishop for that, and threatening mate. And I don't think they have a way out of that. I don't think there's a way out of that checkmate. I have to take this first because the knight is guarding this square. Okay, I'm in check, which I have to move out of. Two possibilities. Which one is it? I can't block. I have nothing to block this check with. Nothing to capture the queen with, so I have to move. And which one of those squares is better? Either one of them. Wait, I think it's 7. I think it's h7, and here's why. Because if I go to h8, they check me here and set up a perpetual check, right? But if I go to h7, they can't check me on h6. There's that, which is guarded by the bishop. And there's and this one's guarded by my queen. So I think it's h7. Okay. Oh. Okay. I've tied my record. Thank you for sticking with me, by the way. I know this is a fairly long video, but that's how long it takes to get this many puzzles for me. Your results may vary. That looks good because the king would only have one escape square. It's not great. Well, then, you know, there's that. It's not great. It's not great because I'm in danger of mate. Every move has to be a check. Yeah, there's a checkmating threat going on right down there. So I need to make sure that here every move is a check, or I lose. Or if not a check, gets rid of one of those pieces that's threatening me. So my possibilities are this check, which I've already mentioned. Ooh. There's this check, which I think is really bad. Not only can it be blocked by the... Well, no, it wouldn't be blocked by the rook. That would not be smart. But it would be captured by the pawn. So that wouldn't be great. Although I could capture back with check. No, the queen is guarding the bishop. Never mind. So that check is out. That rook check is out. There is this check. And is that better? I don't think it is, because I think there are just too many ways to escape it. For example, here. Then what would I do? So I don't think that check is in the cards. This check is just bad, because that still leaves me with this mate coming. So I think this check is probably it. If they block that, I mean, I just capture and I've still got check, and then it's nearly over. So they might not block. I have to take that into account. Rook to h2, no, g2 check. King would not be able to go here because of my pawn, here because of my queen. My rook would be cutting off these squares. So it would only have one legal move. And then that would be next. I think that's it. Because the rook still cuts off all of these, and the pawn still cuts that off. So they'd have to block, and then I would take it. Wow, new record. This is a new record, and I still haven't missed one. So thank you for sticking with me. Let's see how far we can go. I'm pleased with it now, but I don't know how long my computer can actually continue with recording this video. We have some pieces pointing in here, which doesn't look great. Do we have any checks? No, we do not have any checks. This bishop's not checking anything anytime soon. This knight is about to be in danger. Oh, by the way, if you're curious, the dog has stopped barking. Somebody finally took it in, but the neighbor is still hammering on something. It's really cold outside right now. Cold for us, which is like 40 degrees. So taking the pawn is bad, I think, because that just lines up another piece right here. Threatening the bishop is probably not good, because then we just get this. I'm at a loss here. Does that do anything? Doesn't that just invite this pawn in? Well, no, oh no, the pawn can't move if I put my queen here. The pawn would then be pinned to the king. But I'm not threatening anything here. That's what, yeah, see, that doesn't threaten anything. That's why I question that move. That doesn't threaten anything, that doesn't threaten anything, that doesn't threaten anything. The only thing that does is pin this pawn. This one's really complicated. For me, like, this would be silly, right? Because, okay, I'm just going to move this pawn. We'll see what happens. Yeah, that wasn't it. Oh, and it won't even tell me what I did wrong. Okay. I had to do something, and I know the video's fairly long already, so. There is a very interesting thing here with the rook sacrifice. If the king recaptures, I have check here. But no, then the king would just get out that way. So that's not as interesting as I thought. I thought these two bishops would be pretty powerful, but yeah, the king would just get out of that. Now there is this check, but the bishop just captures, and then this doesn't do anything because the bishop can just come back. So that's my only check, I think. Maybe there's a move that threatens something. Bringing in the knight to do what with it? What would we be bringing in the knight for? Yeah, see, there was a sudden jump here from medium level puzzles to difficult ones, at least for me. Yeah, again, video's too long. I'm just going to take the bishop and see. Oh, that was it. Okay. Wait, is it this to get their rook? I just now saw that. How about that? 31. Did not expect to get that. I am down a full piece because we both have queens, but the opponent has a bishop. So there, yeah, that check's not good, right? Okay, there is this check which wins the bishop. That seems okay. I'm gonna do that. No, that wasn't it. Okay. Well, it seemed like a great plan. It was a fork, right? But let's see. This is pin the knight here. What if there was a way to unpin that? or something else. What else is there? I mean, there's this really not great sacrifice, right? That's not a great sacrifice. There is this, which threatens the bishop immediately, but what else does it threaten? Not much. Not much. I mean, it puts more pressure on this pawn. What about, what else do I have? I mean, I can move the knight. It's not a hard pin, right? But there's nothing, there's nowhere for the knight to really go that does anything crucial. There's no checks here with this bishop. No checks here. If we do this and then this, nothing else happens at that point. Yeah, I'm gonna do queen to b6. Yeah, okay. Thank you for watching, but I set a new record, and I am gonna go back and look at the 3 puzzles that I missed, and hopefully I'll learn something. And maybe you'll learn something here. So, thanks again. We'll see you next time.